got my mail late last night, a letter from a girl who found the time to write to a lonesome boy somewhere in the night. She sent me a railroad ticket to take me to her loving arms, and the big steel rail gonna carry me home to the one I love. Well, I've been here many long days, I haven't found a place that I could call my own. Not a two-bit bed to lay my body on. I've been stood up, I've been shook down, I've been dragged into the sand, and the big steel rail gonna carry me home to the one I love.
A spur of the Chiltern Hills reaches into North London, ending in a high bluff overlooking the wide Lee Valley. Here is Alexandra Park and the palace. Conceived as a commercial venture, a centre of public entertainment to rival the Crystal Palace, it was opened in 1873, but 16 days later it burned down, and the fire engines came from London by train. 2 years later, this building replaced it. London's first airship ascended from the park, and the first parachutist from a captive balloon descended here. In those days, travel meant the steam train, and 3 railways planned routes to the palace. Only the Great Northern reached it. Their branch started 4 miles away and 200 feet below at a wayside station by Hornsey Wood called Seven Sisters Road. From here, trains ran onto the lines of the Metropolitan, the North London, and even the South Eastern Railway, from Highgate to the docks, to the city, and to Woolwich and the Kentish suburbs easily seen from the palace. At Finsbury Park are the rusting remains of the 1930s revival of an old plan to connect the large-bore Moorgate tube with the Highgate and Palace lines. The war came, the extensions and electrification stopped, yet the dream of tube trains at Crouch End and Muswell Hill persisted for 20 years, a promise never fulfilled. On an elaborate flyover at Oxford Road, the branch climbs away from the main line. Today, this serves as a useful shunting neck for passing engines and vehicles, including Pullman cars, from the down line to the up line sidings next to Finsbury Park. Branch trains from Finsbury Park downside start their climb on a long, gradually ascending brick viaduct, which crossed over the slow main line before joining the branch. Sometimes an Enfield and a Highgate train left side by side on these 2 tracks, and then steadily the inner train rose higher and higher until it hovered above and then swung westward and upward to Highgate. This is how the district looked 100 years ago. At the top is Alexandra Palace on its hill. Running up the right is the almost new main line to York and the north, crossing the 200-year-old New River. At the left, the high ground of Highgate and the remnants of Middlesex Forest, and in the centre basin, the hamlet of Hornsey, sheltered from the south by the steep ridge of Shepherd's Cot and Stroud Green to Haringey. The branch line climbed to the west on an embankment across the open fields of Stroud Green, to breach the ridge in a deep cutting at Crouch End. First in cutting, and then on a raised formation, it skirted Southwood Common and the pig farms below to enter the tunnels enclosing Highgate Station. Leaving the Edgware and Highgate Railway at Park Junction, it curved east to skirt Brewhouse and Gravel Pit Woods, and then crossed the valley on a viaduct to meet the Alexandra Park's own Muswell Hill Railway and to its terminus by the palace entrance. When holiday-making traffic dried up and gave way to city commuters, stations were added at Muswell Hill, Cranley Gardens and Stroud Green. In the 20s, the ageing 440 tank engines of the North London Railway, with their tall funnels and outside cylinders, elbowed their way up these 1 in 70 gradients with tremendously evident effort, pulling their quota of first, second and third class four-wheelers packed with commuters knee to knee. The Great Northern's characteristic somersault signals were mostly replaced in the 30s by three-aspect colour light signalling. Where the line crossed Stapleton Hall Road, the Tottenham and Hampstead Railway passed deep below in a tunnel on its way from St Pancras to the Essex shores of the Thames. This formed one of the several geographical curiosities of the line. 3 layers of transport, one above another, and right on top of the bridge itself was Stroud Green Station. Only a few relics now remain. Still on a high embankment, the line approaches the ridge. The bridge over Mount Pleasant Villas, rebuilt after the Second World War, marked the beginning of the cutting. At almost its deepest point, it severed an ancient track along the ridgeway. The cast-iron footbridge was built to preserve the right-of-way, which is still in use from Highgate Hill to Haringey. Crouch End Station was built where the line passed under an ancient track, which in previous centuries had formed the high road from London to York. This road bridge, like many of the others, is 100 years old, and it was never built to carry the weight and volume of modern motor traffic. Beyond Crouch End, the line curves through the former pig-raising farms of Crouch Hall. Climbing up towards the Shepherd's Cot Ridge, it crosses Stanhope Road and skirts the head of the Hornsey Valley. Northwood Road passes under, through a narrow brick arch which marked a farm road and a watercourse. The Lineside Cottage, with its monkey puzzle tree, is an example of the relics of rural London which owe their preservation to being isolated by the railway. Alongside the Great North Road, confronted by the steep ridge of Shepherd's Cot, the railway burrowed into tunnel. Here, during the Great Plague, and about the site of Highgate Station, loaded tumbrils from London dumped the corpses into this hollow, and so the nearby wood became known as Churchyard Bottom. Originally, the centre area contained a third track. This was mainly used for the Kentish trains that terminated here. The wide platform replaced it later, and the structures date from the 30s plan for a vertical interchange between the City and West End tube trains. During the 40s and early 50s, passengers from the tube trains below climbed these stairs to change for the Palace Line steam trains. One of the original station buildings still survives. The Ice Age glaciers reached as far south as Highgate, pushing before them an accumulation of geological rubbish. Single-track tunnels like these were easier to build in the unstable ground. The rebuilt coping of the upline tunnel seems to indicate a settlement of some kind. A landmine damaged the north end of the tunnels in 1941. That year saw the first tube train climb to break surface alongside Cherry Tree Wood on the new extension line from Archway. Here the new line merged with the old, and tube trains at last reached Barnet. This part of the Great Plan was fulfilled. War and post-war crises occupied the next decade, with completion still deferred. Meanwhile, the line around the City of London's Highgate Woods carried the push-pull steam trains in rush hours only. The last train ran in 1954, and the rails were removed in 1958. In a decade, the woods reclaimed their own, covering the ballast like a healed scar. Only a few feet away, the tube trains pause in the carriage sidings. This old bridge has suffered 100 years of frustration. With Highgate Woods preserved by the City of London, no road ever reached it, and it remains a spacious pathway to a quiet and shady place. When this station was opened in 1902, Muswell Hill had grown from a village to an extensive residential district. City gentlemen stepped from their train on summer evenings onto a quiet station among the trees, with neat hedges and well-cultivated gardens lining the platforms. On cold winter mornings they foregathered by the blazing coal fire in the waiting room until their train drew in, bound for King's Cross, Broad Street or Moorgate. The overbridge here carries Muswell Hill Road, originally an old track leading from Highgate to the healing waters of Our Lady of Muswell. Curving to the northeast, the line clung to the hillside below St. James' Church, with Alexandra Palace almost in sight across the deep valley of the Moselle stream. The brick viaduct spanning this valley was one of the major engineering works of the line, giving passengers a superb view across the Thames to Blackheath and the Kentish Hills. At the far end, the railway passed under Muswell Hill and below the ancient Green Man. The spacious forecourt of the later Muswell Hill station in olden days often held as many as 20 horse-drawn carriages awaiting the trains. In such a hilly district, in the days before the motor bus, the mode of travel to a playground centre was one of great importance. The Alexandra Palace and its railway were dependent on each other. 99,000 travelled by train in the first 16 days before the fire. London's very first electric tramway was opened in the palace grounds in 1898, and not until the middle 30s were the little four-wheel single-deck trams finally succeeded by the 233 bus. The bus route passes under the old railway at the point where Stroud Green Station stood. The entrance, through what seems like a house at the corner of a street, led to a flight of wooden stairs and up to a booking office on a landing built under one of the arches of the bridge. The construction was almost entirely of wood and always had a temporary appearance. Approaching trains could be heard from afar off. In pre-amalgamation days, the difference between the various companies' trains were audibly evident from a distance. Apart from the contrasting exhaust notes, the sharp bark of the Great Northern, and the more energetic woof of the North London engines, the equally spaced axles throughout the North London train produced a distinctive and regular chorus dum 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 dum, as if by some coincidence the space between the axles. In 1949, London Transport Executive repeated its pledge to complete the electrification of the Palace Line as a matter of first priority. Later, announcing their decision to close the line, they stated that in view of the adequate alternative services available and the small number of passengers affected, there was no other course open. Today, it is hard to believe that a city tube train service would have run empty to Crouch End and Muswell Hill. Yet in 1954, the axe fell.
Well, here I am, my hat in my hand, standing on the broad highway. Will you give a ride to a lonesome boy who missed the train last night? I went into town for one last round and I gambled my ticket away. Now the big steel rail won't carry me home to the one I love. Now the big steel rail won't carry me home to the one I love.